Good evening and welcome to Carleton's 8th annual Throwback celebration for economics alumni, featuring our special guest, Armin Yelnesian. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that we are broadcasting this event from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. As we're gathered virtually, we invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the land that you find yourself on today. We would also like to acknowledge that today is Orange Shirt Day, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Today, people all over the country are encouraged to take some time to meaningfully reflect on truth and reconciliation in Canada. Carleton is encouraging members of its extended community to wear orange shirts and meaningfully reflect on the harmful impact of residential schools and to seek out opportunities towards reconciliation on this day and beyond. With that said, I'd like to start our event by thanking everyone who has taken the time to tune in and formally welcome you to Carleton's 8th annual Throwback celebration for economics alumni. In case you aren't familiar, my name is David Mayer, and along with Zach Sullivan, I currently serve as the co-president of the Carleton Economics Alumni Chapter. Part of Carleton's broader alumni network, the Economics Chapter is committed to bringing together graduates of Carleton's undergraduate, MA, and PhD economics programs to maintain connections through a range of social activities and professional networking events. First founded in 2013 under the stewardship of former President Glenn Barber, the chapter has been responsible for seasonal book clubs, pub nights, meet and greets, and serves as a source of information regarding events of interest for young economists in the Ottawa area. Of course, we would be remiss not to note the challenging circumstances under which this year's celebration arrives. Whether we are alumni grappling with the specter of prolonged distance work, or students and faculty forced to adjust their learning and teaching styles to virtual classrooms, we can all empathize with the sacrifices we've had to make over the last year and a half. On behalf of the chapter, we'd like to express our deepest support and well wishes to each and every one of you as we collectively navigate our way through this unique moment. At present, the chapter is adjusting its plans for the slate of events in the forthcoming year. As an organization, Carleton's alumni networks operate under the philosophy of here for good. And in keeping with that tradition, we would like to reiterate our commitment to fostering a stronger alumni network. Present difficulties notwithstanding, it's our intention to continue working towards common goals, Carleton's undergraduate and graduate economics societies, respectively. In particular, we would like to mention that this Saturday, the Carleton Graduate Economics Society is hosting an in-person networking event at Majors Hill Park at 4 p.m. To get involved and hear more about upcoming events, you can register for the alumni email list via Carleton's website, and you are equally welcome to join our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. So without further ado, I would like to open the microphone to Professor Brenda O'Neill, Dean of the Faculty of Public Affairs.
Thanks, David, and welcome everyone. I want to say first, just thank you for the invitation to just speak briefly with you this evening. It's my pleasure. Special welcome to students, faculty, and alumni that are joining us tonight from wherever. As we know, online, we're never quite sure where people are situated. And also a special thank you and welcome to our guest speaker, Armin Yelnesian. And I want to say I'm extremely pleased to be hearing from her tonight, not because she's a woman who is an economist, but because she's such an important and strong economist who just happens to be a woman. As was David mentioned, one of the things, it's been such a hard year, this past year, a year and a half even now. And so one of the things I think for those of us on campus is how much we actually miss being able to meet for these kinds of events in person. And I think we all will be quite happy when we can get back to doing these things in person, if nothing else for the kind of the chatter and the meeting that happens outside of the actual formal part of the event. And I think we're all looking forward to getting back to that. I've been here, as tomorrow is my 1-year anniversary at Carleton and as Dean of the Faculty of Public Affairs. So one of the things that I've always said in joining FPA, I was so pleased to be able to join the faculty was partly because of my background. I have a BA in an honors BA, which is a combined poly and econ. And then I went on to do a master's in economics. And one of the reasons why I'm interested in hearing from the speaker tonight, in part to hear about her experiences, because when I did that master's in econ, there were not a lot of women sitting around the seminar rooms or the tables or the classrooms when I was there. So I have a particular, I think, vantage point when I think about economics and its importance. And I don't have to tell anybody here how strong the economics department is at Carleton University. There's award-winning faculty members and their research is award-winning. And I always say that always filters into the strength of what happens in the classroom. And we all know that that makes for a really strong educational experience here at Carleton. This isn't news to particularly the alumni or the students already that are gathered here tonight. You already know this. But I think I'm going to stop there because I'm also well aware that no one logged on tonight to hear me. So I think I should stop now and say thanks, everyone. And I'm looking forward to the speaker tonight.
Awesome. Thank you very much for those remarks, Dean O'Neill. So with that, I would like to turn over the floor to Professor Hashmat Khan, the current chair of the economics department.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Brenda. It's my great pleasure to be here joining the economics alumni event. And David and Zach, special thanks to you and to Simon for really putting this together. I know this takes a lot of effort, so you guys have done an amazing job of putting this all together and continue to do so. So thank you very much. I want to welcome all the alumni who are joining us today from both the Ottawa or remotely away from Ottawa. Maybe I was asking just before the event started, I was curious about whether some alumni are joining us from further away. So welcome everyone to this event, and we are all looking forward to hearing Armin's presentation, as Brenda alluded to. And I shared her Toronto Star article with my students in my economics of pandemics class, and I made that a compulsory read. So yeah, so I want to take my few minutes to update you on some of the things that are going on in the department and a few of the highlights that I would like to share with alumni. You know, it's the first time that we're delivering courses online, high flex, and in person. Never happened before. So it has its own learning by doing aspects to it. And so we're kind of going through that. And we have a new graduate diploma in economic policy that just got launched this fall. So this is a remotely delivered 2.0 credit program. And I'm really excited about this unique economic policy program. And so that's something new relative to last year that I want to bring to your attention as something new in the department. And we have further strengthened our relationship with the Bank of Canada by starting this advanced macro modeling workshop series. And we've had a few of these workshops which were very well attended, and some by our alumni. So we are continuing to host those in the coming months and early next year. So please keep an eye out and publicize it in your networks. I mean, one of the key things about the Alumni Chapter is networking. And what better way to do that through engagements of this type, you know? So I think you will hear more about that in the coming weeks. And we had our undergraduate team actually went to the final stage of the Bank of Canada Governors Challenge. So that was a huge highlight, and under Professor Raul Reza Garcia's coaching and leadership, the team performed really well, and we're hoping that this time we'll go all the way and win it. So that's another kind of key news from the department that I want to share. And on the research front, we are going through the pandemic. It's not over yet, although we look forward optimistically. The department has produced a lot of research on COVID-related topics, and several of my colleagues, including myself, have been involved in COVID-related research, and we received SSHRC funding for that as well. And I had the honor and privilege to be the co-editor for one of the 3 co-editors for Canadian Journal of Economics for the special issue on COVID economics. And this issue is coming out in a month or month and a half from now. So that's something that is, where timely research was done, much of it also through our department. And so I'm quite proud of that as the chair, that we participated, we directed our research towards this ongoing pandemic and provided some implications for policy. So, that's sort of what I wanted to share with you. And I'm really looking forward to also hearing Armin's presentation. So thank you once again, welcome. And, I look forward to seeing you all in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Khan. It's always exciting to hear what's going on at the department. So with that, I'll turn it over to my co-president, Zach Sullivan.
Hi, all. My name is Zach Sullivan, and as David mentioned, I'm the co-president of the Carleton Economics Alumni Chapter. This evening, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest of honor, Ms. Armin Yalnizyan, the Atkinson Foundation Fellow on the Future of Workers. A leading voice in Canada's economic policy scene, Ms. Yalnizyan has worked as a policy advisor to the Deputy Minister of Employment and Social Development Canada, and from 2008 to 2017 was a senior economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives Inequality Project. Yalnizyan has contributed economics columns for the Globe and Mail's Economy Lab from 2010 to 2013. And from 2012 to mid-2018, she provided weekly business commentary for CBC Radio's Metro Morning and CBC TV's premier business show On the Money, formerly known as the Lang and O'Leary Exchange. She's also a frequent contributor to CBC Radio, TVO's The Agenda with Steve Paikin, and BNN's Bloomberg Markets. You can read her columns in the Toronto Star, Maclean's Magazine, and more recently via her Substack newsletter. During the early days of the pandemic, Yalnizyan helped to popularize the phrases she session and she covery to describe the disproportionate impact of the economic downturn on women in the labor force. A native Torontonian, Yalnizyan holds a bilingual BA in economics from Glendon College, York University, as well as a master's in industrial relations from the University of Toronto. She is the recipient of numerous awards and accolades, including, but not limited to, the Atkinson Economic Justice Award in 2002, the Morley Gunderson Prize in Industrial Relations in 2003, as well as the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012. Please note that if you have any questions for Ms. Yalnizyan, we ask that you please submit them via the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our best to address them after the presentation. Now, without further ado, please join me in providing a warm, socially distanced welcome to Armin Yalnizyan.
Thank you so much, Zach, and David, and Dean O'Neill, and Professor Khan. It is a pleasure to be addressing the cohort of undergraduates, graduates, and PhD students and alumni from Carleton. As has been pointed out, it is a remarkable group of people, and I hope to share with you some of the reasons why I think you can rest assured that economics is going to become even more influential, and particularly the students from Carleton will have an opportunity to shape the world in which we all operate. I'm going to start sharing my screen, okay? Because we don't have tons of time. Okay, how do I get that thing down? There we go. Okay, so economics is its own language, isn't it? As a student of economics, probably the first couple of years, you were wondering what the heck is going on? What are people talking about? I'm sure even the alumni remember those first few courses and wondering, is this for me? I mean, I'm sure there's a few people that are born to be an economist, but most people are not. But I'm old enough to remember that the way I was taught economics is not the way we are talking economics now. And that's really the point of my presentation, is how the discipline of economics is changing. Like many other things during the pandemic, it seems like there are paradigm shifts going on. So what am I talking about when I talk about shift happening in our profession? And can I get this? Why can I not get this thing? To go forward, I can. Look at that. Here it is. Okay. My introduction to economics ease was as a so-called mature student. I was just not 18 years old. I was somewhere around 25 years old. This picture is kind of what I felt like when I was taking economics too. It's like, what the heck is going on? These concepts of marginal utility and indifference curves, in particular, the idea of an indifference curve between income and leisure, when I knew so many people that were doing unpaid work and there was no vector for that two-dimensional graph. The idea of perfect competition where there's no power imbalances or information asymmetries. The idea is that these assumptions, the foundational beliefs of our profession could still lead to forecasting, theories, prognostications of how policy should take place, even though the very foundations of our modeling were so weird. I have a very strange sense of humor, so I decided to continue to study economics, and I'm really glad that I did, because I was introduced to Alfred Marshall, and I was introduced to Sylvia Ostry, the grand dame of economics in Canada, who introduced me to the concept of labor economics in Canada, and that there are gendered differences in both experiences and outcomes. And people like Albert Hirschman, who I was introduced to as an undergraduate, that talked about institutional changes. So how you get introduced to the topics will help you understand who counts and what counts in economics. That is changing. The big ideas I started out with in my profession was that micro was more important than macro, that markets were more important than government, that taxes were bad, but profits were good, that government spending, deficit, and debt were actually things that you had to live with, but basically you want to minimize them, that labor was just another input in the production function, and things like higher minimum wages simply added costs, that globalization was absolutely our future, and that inflation was a bigger problem than unemployment. In short, money was more important than people in the analysis of economics. That's changing. This presentation is not about the next big thing. I'm not going to be talking about modern monetary theory or carbon taxes or the gig economy or, God bless me, the she-cession or the potential she-covery. I am not even going to be talking about Bitcoin. Well, I kind of will be, but I'm kind of not going to be. You'll see what I mean later. What I'm talking about is that the big ideas are changing in economics. Once in a lifetime types of changes in the way we think about the importance of deficit and debt, about the role or the multiple roles of government in both providing basics to people, and justice, but also boosting growth. We are talking about the things we measure in economics, explicitly challenging and critiquing the role of measuring everything in terms of dollars and cents through GDP, and discussing what we should be measuring and whether our official statistics are up to the task and what we need to do to supplement them. And as a labor economist, I have to say that the labor impacts are perhaps the most striking changes that have taken place in the course of my career as an economist. Both the theory and the evidence on minimum wages, inflation, and unemployment are all changing. The relationship between inflation and unemployment, the idea that you can raise the minimum wage without killing too many jobs anyway, that you might actually be creating jobs by boosting the economy from the bottom. In political science, there's the idea of Overton's window. And at the bottom of that slide, you will see, I think you can see it, eh? Can you guys, is my black bar barring your vision? Can somebody tell me if, yeah, you can see the very bottom of the slide without that mute button thing there? Great. So Overton window is basically saying there are, at any given point in time, some things are absolutely unlikely to happen because they are unacceptable to the majority of people. But that window can open and shut in different ways, and it moves in different ways. The graphic I have here is taken from an American website where red represents the Republicans and blue represents the Democrats. And the idea here is that Overton window can shift to the left or to the right of the political spectrum over time. But what I'm saying to you here is it's just as applicable to how we think about things in economics, that certain ideas that were once unacceptable and impractical suddenly become reasonable, perhaps even popular, and find a home somewhere in the middle in a consensus area. Other things become totally polarized. So things do change. And right now we are seeing considerable change in the way we think about economics, talk about economics, and conduct ourselves as economists. I believe that the 6 things that are really reshaping economic theory and practice today are population aging, extreme climate events, the techno-presence possibilities that did not exist to the same scale before the pandemic, cyber currencies. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Bitcoin, but not really directly about Bitcoin, data ownership, and fiscal accountability. 2 of these 6 things are absolutely inevitable, that they will change the way we think, both our theory and practice as economists. The next 4, those top 2, absolutely are going to change like a cascade of monetary and fiscal policies, as well as our theory and evidence of how economies work. The next 4, techno-presence, cyber currencies, data ownership, and fiscal accountability, are at this moment unpredictable how they are going to shape our thinking, but certainly they are raising issues that we have not considered as economists previously. So I'll start with the first one. Population aging means this graphic was from a study of what is happening in Japan. So I just put our own numbers on it. Back in 1990, there were 6 working age people, sorry, I shouldn't say workers, 6 people of working age to support 1 person that was over the age of 65. By the year 2000, it was still roughly the same, 5.5 working age people. But by 2025, which I will remind you is only 4 years away, actually 3.5 years away, it will be 3.1 people. In Japan, it's 2.7 people. That means that we are going to go from decades of worrying about labor surpluses to potentially decades of labor shortages. That's what this chart is about. So the bright blue area is, you can see the falling fertility rate. These are children under the age of 15. The gray area is people 65 years of age and older. And it's true that more people aged 65 to say 70 or 75 are working more. So it isn't a great proxy right now for what is happening, but still you get a sense that we've got fewer people entering the labor market. We've got way more people that are older. We're going to reach a dependency ratio that looked like the baby boom in the 50s to the 60s, but it's going to last for decades, not just a few years. And the pace of GDP growth that propels the whole economy is going to be less than half that previous rate for at least the foreseeable future. And we are going to have not 3.1 working age adults for people that are too old to work, but 1.7 working age adults per person that is too young or too old to work. And don't forget, we will also have people that are too sick to work within the working age. So things are going to start getting very tight. You've been hearing about labor shortages. You're going to keep hearing about them for some time to come. You know, I just don't understand. There we go. And it's not only Canada that is going through this. This is happening throughout the global north, particularly the rich countries. But South Korea is right behind. South Korea is in fact aging more rapidly than any country right now. And China will be joining that parade because of its one-child policy in the 1980s. What happens when the working age population becomes a shrinking cohort throughout the global north where all the money is? We're going to be all competing for newcomers at the same time that everybody else is competing for newcomers. You have probably heard people lose their minds about too many immigrants coming into the country, that under the current administration, we have gone from 350,000 people entering the country as immigrants to 400,000, and that number will continue to rise. There has been a faction of people saying what we need is 100 million Canadians by the end of the century. There's other people saying that's way too much and we should actually be pulling back our immigration levels. But I just want to remind you that immigration is only one flavor of newcomer. The other flavor are temporary residents who are students as well as refugees, as well as temporary foreign workers who come in under a variety of mechanisms. In 2019, prior to the pandemic, Canada admitted 1.2 million new people through our doors. Now, some of them won't stay. In fact, only 28% of them were permitted to stay. But a lot of them will stay for multiple years and contribute to our economy, but also require things like housing. These numbers have been rising every year. And the relationship between permanent and temporary has changed over time with no explicit policy discussion. This is what the map looks like. So here in this early part from 2000 to 2006, the black line is the economic immigrants we let into the country. These are people that come into the country under the economic, what's it called, the volet, whatever that is, through the economic pathway to Canada. That's not family reunification. It's people that meet the test for being a new resident because they're going to be part of the workforce. And after 2006, we let in more temporary people than we let in permanent people. That somewhere around 2014 moderated. The red line is the temporary foreign worker program. We had a number of scuffles on how the banks were using temporary foreign workers, also malfeasance in agriculture. So the then immigration minister, Jason Kenney, tightened the requirements for temporary foreign workers, but that led to the increase in other mechanisms for letting people in through the temporary doorways, things like the mobility programs that we have that do not require permitting. So we have a real issue that by 2019, which was our peak, where 72% of everybody that we brought in to either work or study came in temporarily. And we have very few pathways to permanence there. So by 2025, all our net labor market growth in this country is going to come from newcomers. It is extremely important that a country of immigrants, as we like to call ourselves, has a real honest conversation with ourselves about whether the trend to more temporary foreign workers is the correct one. I know that we have been talking about labor shortages a lot, and people say that the future of workers, technologically speaking, might be that there aren't enough jobs. I want you to understand that we don't know what the future holds in terms of technological impacts. It is possible that the digital economy will substitute labor and eliminate labor. It may also complement labor and trigger more job growth. We don't know where it's going, though there's a lot of concern about whether we're providing people with the right skills. But I can guarantee you we are going to have labor shortages in two of the most important areas in our daily lives: the care economy, which includes health and social assistance and education, from cradle to grave education. That part of the economy constituted 4 million workers in 2021, just that last count. 12.3% of GDP, which eclipses everything but real estate and finance in this country. 21% of all jobs. No sector comes close to that. It has an aging workforce in the healthcare sector. Doctors and nurses are both aging demographics, and there will be a growing demand. In the last year alone, from the second quarter 2020 to the second quarter 2021, we had 100,000 unfilled jobs vacancies in 2 areas alone, a 53% increase in unfilled job vacancies in hospitals and 49% in residential care facilities. We don't have a health human resource plan. We also are going to need more people to help with elder care, be that through long-term care facilities or through home care. And of course, we are starting a 5-year multilateral plan to expand quantity and quality of early learning and childcare. We do not have a national strategy for the workers that provide the care in the care economy. We are going to have chronic labor shortages. On the other side of the barbell here is the the construction and reconstruction economy. So building houses, fixing houses, renovating houses, repairing infrastructure, extending infrastructure, making sure we get supply chains that we need, getting the materials to where they're needed when they're needed. So construction plus transportation account for 2.4 million workers, 11% of GDP, 12.8% of all jobs. Again, the skilled trades are an aging workforce and there's a growing demand. This sector actually shot up with unfilled job vacancies even more rapidly than the care economy, 58% growth in unfilled job vacancies, though fewer in number. And it is estimated that we will have over 300,000 people short by 2029. Again, no national strategy to make sure we are not caught with our pants down on predictable labor shortages. So if you think we're talking about labor shortages now, just hold your breath for a little while. It'll get worse. Oh, before I go on to that, I just want to say we have a historic moment to bring along, since 2010, the IMF, World Bank, OECD, all the mainstream economic institutions have been talking about not just growth, but inclusive growth. This is the moment where we can put flesh on the bones of that concept, where we could actually provide training and job opportunities to people who are systemically and historically locked out of both opportunities to train and opportunities to learn and earn. So we could do that, or we could do what we've always done, which is import the solution. And again, there it becomes really important to be clear-eyed whether we are bringing in permanent residents to do the job, or we are bringing in just-in-time workers and asking them to leave when the job is done so we can bring in somebody else. These are huge public policy issues that are going to shape the way we do our economics. Because full employment, as Jesse Jackson used to say, we had full employment under slavery too. Just having a job isn't enough. So we're going to be doing a lot more work on quality of jobs, who holds the jobs, when we have, I'm going to get to that later, so I'm not going to go down that path yet. The second thing that we can't duck is extreme climate events. It used to be in the day, we talked about whether we should be focusing on mitigation or adaptation. If you focus on adaptation, then you're not getting in the way of growth, and that's what every economist wants. And other people were saying, we've got to get in the way of the way we do growth. Right now, we are seeing that we don't have a choice. This isn't an either or. We have to do both. We have to adapt to what is happening, plus we have to mitigate something even worse from happening. We have seen since 1970 increased super extreme events. You can see the top half of this chart is from Financial Times, a Financial Times report that shows that the biggest insurance disasters of the last 60 years have come from, is that right? Is it 60 years? It's 50 years, isn't it? Sorry, bad math. The last half century's biggest disasters have come in the last few years. That's why you're seeing these overlapping blue lines. And we are not even talking about most of what's happened in 2021 yet. The heat waves, the floods, the fires, and the hurricanes. We're not through hurricane season yet. The interesting thing about this chart is on the bottom half of the chart, it's showing that fewer people are dying because we're evacuating them more. So get ready for climate refugees. That's what it's going to mean to have more extreme climate events more often, where you actually have to move people. Well, you can move people within a nation so long, but at some point we're going to be actually depopulating whole areas that are becoming systematically problematic. Where are these people going to go? What's our policies on climate refugees? Not only more costly, but less avoidable. And this is changing. Extreme climate events are changing both the private sector's investment plans and the private sector's forecasts for how to deal with things. We have seen that over the last 5 decades, we have spent already $3.6 trillion, $3.6 trillion on simply insurance. We are not talking about loss of livelihood, loss of life, none of that. This is an insurance number. And Swiss Re, which is a reinsurance company, has said that by mid-century, we are on track to losing 10% of current total economic value. That full quote in gray is from their report, saying that we have no option but to act because we are looking at losing money by not acting. So economists can no longer talk about this as a nice to have. If ESG is no longer going to be, a frill, it's going to be at the heart of investment decisions. The pandemic made it really clear that you could work from home, right? All sorts of things were suddenly possible to do from home in your pajamas. But more flexibility also means a cascade of other potential issues for workers, and I'll get into that in a second. Here we go. Did this affect a lot of people? Well, in Canada, no. Before the pandemic hit in 2016, only 4% of workers in Canada worked from home. Peak work from home was April 2020, and even so, only 41% of Canadian workers in the middle of a lockdown were working from home. In other words, the majority of people who were still working were working in a workplace. By this last month, the last labor force survey, 24% of all workers were working from home. Half of these people were working from home before. So this may or may not be permanent, but it is certainly not the majority of the Canadian workforce that can or wants to work from home. But if you have figured out that you can work from home, so has your employer. And if you have figured out that maybe you want to work from anywhere, so has your employer. Bari or Bangladesh is going to be increasingly a question mark, a very real question mark for employers, whether they're in the public or the private sector, that are trying to contain costs in an era where costs are going to be burgeoning, but revenues are not. So we have COVID that triggered the adoption of telepresence and platforms. What do platforms do? The platform economy unbundles tasks from jobs. It lets you do just-in-time tasks. And now that includes engineering, programming, accounting, auditing, medical and diagnostic tasks, legal tasks, clerical tasks. A whole bunch of these are very highly skilled tasks. When people find that they are competing with somebody that's just like them on the other side of the world who costs a lot less, we are possibly going to see the impacts of globalization affecting white-collar, high-skilled, high-paid white-collar workers that have been thus far insulated from the process of globalization. It might not happen, but it could happen. And that might affect both the amount of income people make and its steadiness. And because richer, more skilled people pay more taxes into the system, it will also affect public revenues. perhaps providing a reduction in public revenues right at a time when population aging is saying we need more services. I've got a whole bunch of other reflections on this that I've put in the source note if you wish to look at them, but I'm going to now move to cyber currencies. Yes, I'm going to talk about Bitcoin, but not just Bitcoin. And I'm not talking about it because it's the next best thing. I'm talking about it because as an economist, we are moving from a world where the world of money is regulated and national, or at least in economic blocks like in Europe, to something that is not regulated and is global and is decentralized. And it raises the very deep question of who's in charge of economic activity. So the economic value issues is that Bitcoin first was introduced in 2009, on the tailwind of the global financial crisis. Everybody could see the shortcomings of the global financial system. What cyber currencies do is that they are not national, they're global. They are not centralized, they're decentralized. They do not come with fees, or very rarely do they come with fees. And they serve the unbanked really well. That makes them of interest to the developing nations, which are galloping ahead economically right now, and also gangsters. So we've got a real issue about who likes cyber currencies and why. And what kind of economic growth they facilitate. Did you know there are over 6,800 cyber currencies in use right now? This is from yesterday, no, 2 days ago. Every day there's new ones added. There were 2,000 roughly in 2018. The number of cyber currencies continues to escalate. As I said before, they're not regulated. In fact, a lot of them function on the ethos that part of their value is that they are free from government manipulation and control. They're extremely volatile. So they're not actually a currency in the sense that they are used for exchange use. And they're not a store of value because as an investment, your investment goes up and down. Really what they are for is gambling. And here I have a picture of a screenshot of Bitcoin in the last 7 days. If you think that looks volatile, you should take a look at its existence since 2009. 2 days ago, one Bitcoin was worth $42,600. And that was down by 4%. It goes up and down every day. It is part of a casino economy. That's what the economic value is. But let me tell you, friends, the really big issue here is the poli-sci issue. It's about power and stability. The whole point of cryptocurrencies and distributed ledgers of blockchain technology is to eliminate the middleman. That puts in question the role and future profitability of banks. Oh, don't get me wrong, they figured it out. They're starting to move into this territory, but it will affect their profitability. And they are right now one of the most profitable sectors of the economy. Monetary policy becomes much harder to do to the extent that cryptocurrencies start blurring the line between the real economy and cyber economy. And when you take a look at how they are being used, they are starting to move back and forth. You can invest with real dollars, then you move into crypto, then you move back. It becomes very difficult to regulate anything. So monetary policy comes into question. And monetary policy is the way we maintain stability in the macroeconomy and perhaps the conditions for growth. They are, as I mentioned, associated with illegal activities and financial crimes. They're also associated with a burgeoning gray economy, the under the table economy that can't be taxed, can't be marshaled up. You can't train for it. It is like a parallel universe to the economy. I'm going to raise an issue that you probably haven't thought of. The way sanctions work in a world with rogue states is through the US dollar. It is the global reserve currency. What happens when North Korea or El Salvador or Turkey or other nations that become truly rogue states opt out? North Korea has been considering this. Turkey actually was considering it in April and banned the use of it, but continued investing in it. And when I say it, it's they, because there's not one cyber currency that is being discussed. Cuba has adopted it. And the last story I'll tell you about this shows how much this is about power and control and stability is on Friday. Are we Friday today? No, we're Thursday. So less than a week ago, China banned anything to do with cryptocurrencies. It is poised to launch its own digital renminbi. It will tolerate no interruption of its control over the digital world of currency. This is going to be a huge issue, whether China is able to control cyber currencies, but it for sure poses a threat to sovereign currencies. If you want to read anything that's really interesting, read what's happening in El Salvador, where something like 2.1 million people are using cyber currencies right now, but the price goes up and down every day. Like, how do you use it? It's like, it's a gambling tool. The next gamble is data ownership. You are invisible until you're suddenly visible, and then you become invisible again. Who owns your data will determine what your value is and what kind of value you have. We are big data. Big data is us going about our lives, but we don't use big data by and large. Companies do. There are conceptions of data, like what do economists do? Economists use data, request data, manipulate data, report on data. We don't, by and large, use big data. Companies do. Companies extract value from data like a commodity. They use that extracted data to shape human habits and wants, and by so doing, they deepen and broaden markets so they can make more profits. Proprietary data is often way more granular, much more rapid fire than official statistics and administrative data, but it's less representative of the population. It is representing a certain thing that is going on, a certain group of users. Maybe a certain region, maybe a certain income bracket. So it's not the same as official statistics and public administrative data. Big data can also be viewed as water, not oil, as a public utility that could be improving life, because we could be using our data to understand how we can facilitate and expand access to statutory rights, to identify better and new ways to access basic services and needs. And what we know is that public systems are very slow to modernize. That's justifiable and correct because their scale is much bigger than most businesses. I'm not including Amazon and Google, but many sources of proprietary data are operating on a much smaller scale, and they're not trying to serve the public good. And public systems have liabilities and accountabilities to their electorate that no company does. But it's also true that public systems have been very slow to access and regulate big data for the public good. What that means for us as economists is that we have to be very careful and critical of the interpretation and representativeness of proprietary data. And that we are running into an era where, as a profession, we have no ethical code on how data is used, but we might be actually running up into it, because the truth is one thing and truthiness is another. I'll give you an example where a bank that shall go unnamed, within 2 years of the introduction of the tax-free savings account in January of 2009, the heart of the global financial crisis, 2 years later, they reported, they surveyed their own high wealth individuals and reported on how tax-free savings accounts were being used and what percentage of people were maximizing their accounts. And that was true for their own client base that were high net worth people, but it did not at all meet what tax statistics showed. Like, it was completely offside what tax statistics were showing. And yet the media picked it up as a story about how tax-free savings accounts were so needed that we needed to raise the ceilings. And that, in fact, was what happened. These data from banks were promoted like a public story, telling a story about everybody, and it changed public policy because we had a government in place at that time that wanted to increase the upper threshold that was permitted. Meanwhile, we have the quality of public data that costs a lot to make better. Statistics Canada has been busting its butt, providing us with data during the pandemic about racial minorities and immigrants and Indigenous populations and how they're doing in the middle of the pandemic. It costs money to do this. They've been doing amazing work on a host of issues. It costs money to do this work in a way that is reliable. We need to also be asking are the companies that do business in our country for access to anonymized data. We already do it with the Canadian Bankers Association, which has a public website that shows how many mortgages are issued, how many mortgages are in arrears, how many credit cards are issued, how many credit cards are in delinquency. And it's anonymized, but you can see it by big cities, you can see it by provinces, and you can see it nationwide. We could be doing the same thing for how people get paid in the gig economy. There are other ways we can provide insights as to what is happening in real time in our country, but we don't do it, and we really should. More at a website that is in our source documents. And my last thing that I would like to raise to you is that we are entering a brand new era of fiscal accountability and we are moving from that cost me how much, you're spending too much, to what did I get for that spending? That's a whole new way for economists to do their jobs. We're talking about 1 in 4 Canadians soon being over the age of 65. These are people that are going to be now, for their golden years, on lower and fixed incomes. They will be paying lower taxes because they have lower incomes, but they will be more reliant on public services. They will have very low tolerance for price inflation. That includes you, cohort of undergraduates, your wage growth. That's part of price inflation. Nobody wants to see price inflation. Wage growth is included in that. The same with tax increases. This is a cranky crowd, the over 65s. And they're a very effective lobby group. So this conversation is not going to go away, and it will not be about smaller governments. It is unlikely to be about tax cuts, and it is not likely to be about, I don't want a deficit. It is like, give me my services and get out of my way. So to be able to do that governments are going to have to do one of two things. They can't cut services and they can't raise taxes. Both of those things are unwanted. So how are they going to deal with it? Oops, wrong thing. I'm going to tell you how they're going to deal with it in 2 slides. But first of all, I want to tell you this. The narratives are changing. We have gone from, my entire professional career was about more market, less government. We are inverting that narrative. We need more government. The last outlook brought the federal government back. Oh yeah, it's back because of the pandemic. But when you take a look at Budget 2020, this is 100 years of the federal government's footprint in the economy, ladies and gentlemen. It was never bigger than during the Second World War. It looks like it got really big during the pandemic, but look where it's falling back to levels less than in the 1960s, at a time when we're going to have a demographic challenge that is going to require somebody doing more. If it's not the feds, it's going to have to be the provinces, but that means it'll depend on where you live, what kind of services you get. So we've got a real big conversation coming up. And I think that conversation impacts how economists do their jobs. It's not just about being bigger, it's being about better. It's not just how much money governments are spending, but what we are getting for our money. It is not just a focus on the cost, the expenditure side of the public ledgers or the revenues, but to a valuation of net benefits. And it is an absolutely nascent methodology. It is super difficult work. This chart on the right-hand side is what we called at ESDC the waterfall chart. It basically shows that public goods produce a cascade of effects. And when you take a look at longitudinal data and extrapolate to 20 years, you see that governments get a benefit from their spending for people that went through a program called Pathways to Education. This is what it's focused on: high school students. And it's geared to people that were very likely to drop out of high school, keeping them in school, giving them financial incentives to stay in school. Then what happens to them? And at the end, it turns out they do really good. They do a lot better financially as individuals, and we do better financially as taxpayers by doing this program. This is the future of economic evaluation, and it is very difficult to do. It's a wonderful area, but it's not easy. So as I said at the beginning, I think there's two areas that without any dispute are going to change the way we think economically. Population aging and extreme climate events are going to put more of a focus on labor than we've ever seen in the last half century anyway, maybe longer. And so will the planet's health be part of our thinking. Is this sustainable? Is this putting us on a trajectory of too fast a temperature rise? Where I am not clear that these drivers will fundamentally change our thinking is in these last four, but definitely we are looking at very profound potential for changing who are the winners, who are the losers, how does money get made, where does money get made, and who is in control. You might be asking yourself the question, what about inequality? I mean, I spent most of my professional life talking about time inequality and monetary inequality and gender inequality. And what I want to say to you about that is that the demographic pressures that we are going to be under with 1.7 working age adults for every person that is too old and too young to work, plus the sick people in that crowd, is going to mean we're going to need all hands on deck. And that is going to mean we have to boost the economy from the bottom up, or we're leaving money on the table. We're growing less than we can be, less than our potential. That the new data that is coming out, people are demanding disaggregated data to talk about the inequalities by gender, by race, by indigeneity, by location, by North and South, by formal and informal, by paid and unpaid care. People want new information. And the changing student body of who studies economics, I'm talking about you here, will change the type of questions that are asked and the type of answers, the type of conversations we are having about what economics is about and who it's for. Because identity changes what we are looking at. Identity changes our sight lines. Where we stand will determine where we sit in the world. So get involved in the world you live in, because we are in the middle of huge transformations right now. The people that are doing economics, the research questions, the data, the policy questions, both theory and praxis is in flux. And I am so grateful that you've invited me to help you think about it, and that you yourself will be talking about your role in making shift happen. Thank you, Carleton, for bringing us together tonight.
So thank you very much, Armin, for your insightful presentation. At this point, we'd like to open the floor to questions from our audience. Once again, you can enter them in the Q&A application at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Already, we've had a few that have come through, and some attendees sneakily decided to send me DMs directly with questions, perhaps to get around the waiting line. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't start with Professor Woolley's comment to you, Armin, saying that she loves the record collection.
Thank you, Francis. Come over and listen to it sometime.
That said, one that came up here is from Inbal Markovich. She said, thank you very much for the fantastic presentation. Data as water versus oil, what a great analogy. This distinction requires a reflection of what values are embedded in the data supply and value chain. How could we as a profession introduce ethical standards? How could universities help in realizing this? And what can economists today do in this regard?
I don't know. Inbal and I have had this conversation before. I don't know how we can talk about ethical standards because, you know, the joke is on the one hand, on the other hand, the two-handed economists are going to kill us, right? But so there's different ways of looking at data, and indeed, data can tell many different stories. But I think we need to be a little more critical about what passes as truth. I just don't. Maybe it's all it is for us to make disclosures up front. Here are the limitations of the data with which I'm working, and make that a feature of economic reports. I'm not sure that's going to go anywhere, but I'm just saying, certainly Inbal's conversations with me have raised this issue in a new way for me. As I said, back in 2010, we were aware of this increasing use of in-house surveys to come up with some hard number, a factoid that you could pepper into a headline, and suddenly you've got a story, you've got earned media about it, and people are talking about it. Is it truth? Well, it's a kind of truth. So I don't know how you get around that. I mean, there are, of course, super ethical people working in banks. I'm not trying to tar them all with, oh my God, they're all, you know, charlatans, they'll do anything for money. Absolutely not. But I think we do need to be aware that, for example, when Google or Amazon decide that they're going to use, or Facebook decide they're going to use data, they also have data that they're not telling us about, but we can't see it because it's proprietary. So we're entering a new world of the Enlightenment. It's like the apotheosis of the Enlightenment is truthiness.
Okay. Glenn asks, what are your thoughts on significantly increasing immigration, e.g. 100 million by 2100? I guess he wants your personal view on the feasibility of that.
I don't know that I've thought about it that much, whether we want 100 million, what that looks like. I mean, I think we are coming close to peak population globally. I think it's going to be very difficult for Canada to get all the people they need. And certainly if we have immigration policies that treat people like temporary, like we'll use you while we can use you. I mean, I just read something today in the Financial Post about the people we most need right now are these, you know, big smarty pants working in cyber stuff, right? IT. These people are coming in on temporary foreign work permits. Maybe they'll make a transition to permanent. Maybe they want to stay, maybe they don't want to stay. I mean, there's a whole new tribe of global nomads that are highly skilled, that can go wherever the offer is the best. I don't think it has dawned on many employers and public policy that we're going to be in competition with the rest of the world very soon. Can we attract 100 million people? Well, it depends on how you treat them. Is Canada a people magnet? Is it the best place in the world for people to go to? Increasingly, people are going to have the choice of the country they go to because everybody's going to need them. So I don't think the question is, should we get to 100 million? I think the question is, can we get the people we need to even maintain our quality of life? I mean, I think that's what's on the agenda right now. It isn't like growth. It's like, can you maintain quality of life? And I don't think that's a given right now. So I think that's a bigger issue than how many people do we have? Because really, you know what the production function is. Growth is population growth plus technological change, productivity. Labor force growth plus productivity growth in a closed economy. And in an open economy, there's a third factor, which is net X minus I, net exports, right? We import stuff, we export stuff. What's the net? GDP grows if there's a plus on that all the time. So one of productivity growth has flatlined since 2014. Since the global price shock, oil price shocks of 2015, we have seen almost a completely flat line in productivity growth. Exports aren't looking that healthy these days for a whole bunch of reasons. That leaves you with population growth. That 100 million by the end of the century is really like all we can think of doing to grow the economy is pour in people and stir. Yeah, it'll grow the economy, but it doesn't really change. It doesn't necessarily improve your quality of life. You're just adding people. And yeah, they need places to live and food to eat and things to consume. So the economy will grow, but it's not progressing. It's just expanding. So the question is, do you just want expansion or do you want improvement? Do you want progress or do you just want more? These are, again, deep economic questions that we are struggling with right now. And to my mind, we're nowhere near our full potential. Like we could add another 60,000 people, 60 million people to our population, but we are not maximizing the potential of the people we've got. Why wouldn't we do that first?
Another question that we received here, given the forthcoming seismic shifts and transformational changes that you discussed earlier in the global economy, what are the most important methodological changes the discipline of economics needs to make to remain relevant and adequately positioned to meet the economic policy challenges of tomorrow?
Can you say that question again, please?
Sure, yeah. Given the forthcoming changes to the global economy that you alluded to at the beginning of your presentation, what is the most important methodological changes the discipline of economics needs to make to remain relevant and adequately positioned to meet the economic and policy challenges of tomorrow?
Whoa.
Oh, okay. Perhaps we can come back to that.
That's a heavy question because it isn't one vector, right?
No.
It is, well, like I say, it's got something to do with data. It's got something to do with how does monetary policy work, and how monetary policy works depends on who's issuing the currency and how is the currency being used. It depends on the primacy of monetary policy over fiscal policy. I mean, we've been seeing this very slow, awful handoff from monetary policy to fiscal policy that central banks have been trying to do since 2010, when they all worked in lockstep in the wake of the global financial crisis. They all said, don't do austerity too fast, right? We need you guys to keep doing it. And half the world went almost immediately into austerity and they screwed everything up. So like, I think that goes back to my point is like after 40 years of more market, less government, we're starting to twig onto the fact that governments play a huge role, not just in providing statutory rights, justice, defense, like the basics, but also in leveraging growth, or minimizing economic destruction. That's both through fiscal and monetary policy, but it's also through regulations, like how we protect the planet, how we protect one another, you know. So there isn't a silver bullet answer to the question, which is an excellent question. Maybe I just need to read. You know what, Zach, if you would do me a favor, if you would send me that question by email, I will think about that question more. Maybe there is a structured answer. Maybe it's just that I'm too tired at this point to come up with a decent answer, but I can tell you that whatever I tell you later will be of a fabric in the sense that it isn't a thing. You know, what's the thing we have to be doing? You know, should we be doing better forecasting, nowcasting, like garbage in, garbage out? What's the data we're putting in there? You know, what kind, like we've made milestones on how we do forecasting, huge developments in how forecasting happens. We still don't predict recessions that terribly well. Nobody can predict where inflation is going. We thought for a while it was going to be temporary. transitory because of the pandemic. Now we're seeing the pandemic is moving into the fourth wave, maybe the fifth wave. Will this last for 5 years? We're now realizing that the supply chain disruptions were not temporary. They are getting more profound as time goes by, which is really problematic. We have never dealt with supply side shocks. Like all our entire suite of public policy to deal with recessions is demand side oriented. So is monetary policy. It's all about demand side changes. We're not ready for the supply side shocks. But what happens when the locusts eat the crops in sub-Saharan Africa and floods destroy the crops in Europe and fires destroy the crops in Western Canada? Like, what happens when basic supplies are nowhere to be found? We're not ready for this story, and economists don't know how to think. I shouldn't say everybody, but we're not taught to think yet on macro demand and supply issues. We're still in a micro world where individual behaviors and individual decision sets are going to shape the world. I think we need more macro economists, but not necessarily the ones that deal with forecasting, that like, how do we understand how micro decisions accrete? I don't know, I'm just rambling now, sorry.
No problem. Perhaps this is a question we can all ponder. And this actually makes for a great segue, because unfortunately we've exceeded our time by a little bit. And I want to thank everyone who who put forth a question but we weren't able to get to. Thank you very much for your interest. But with that, I'm going to have to give the microphone back to David to close us out.
Thanks, Zach. So once again, I would like to thank Armin for taking the time to be with us this evening. It was really great, thought-provoking, some big questions that we'll have to take with us and ponder. In addition, we'd like to extend some special thanks to Professors Khan and O'Neill for taking the time to represent the department, the Faculty of Public Affairs, respectively. We'd also like to thank Professor Simon Power for his continuing I guess you could call it assistance. He's been extremely helpful and an accessible liaison for us, not only with this event, but also many events in the past. We'd also like to thank Rose Crosset from the Alumni and Donor Relations, who helped us coordinate a lot of logistics, as well as Alex Pilkington for the technical side from Carleton's Instructional Meeting and Services. And lastly, we'd actually like to thank, sorry, I have to scroll down my notes. We'd like to thank Inbal Markovic for suggesting Armin as a special guest. It has been a really wonderful evening, and we've very much enjoyed the conversation. So this concludes the formal presentation, or the formal portion of tonight's events. We do have a door prize, and we will be emailing the winner after the event has closed. Thank you all for tuning in, and we really look forward to seeing you at an in-person event, hopefully sometime soon. But in the meantime, stay safe, everyone, and thanks for joining.
It's like having a party and you can't leave until your guests leave.
Yeah. The digital world isn't so different after all.
Yeah, Alex, I think that's a good idea.